Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to give it just a minute or two to let people join the webinar. Okay. Okay, let's see. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Kayla Musil. I'm the program manager of the U.S. Green Building Council of West Michigan. And today we will be talking about Phius, or Passive House Institute US, passive building certification for your business. Pretty typically Phius is seen in the residential space, which I think we'll get into a little bit. But we did want to show you part of the commercial side as well. So we're really excited to have Kat and Doug with us today. Kat is she's the co-founder of Phius and the executive director, and Doug is the president of Farr Associates of Architecture and Urban Design. So just a quick housekeeping thing, there's the Q&A feature and the chat feature. Try to keep your questions to the Q&A. We'll have a 15-minute section dedicated to that at the end, and it'll just keep us a little bit more organized as we go through those questions. But go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. Let us know if you are enjoying the snow that we just got yesterday, or if you're not so into it. I always like the first snow, so I like looking out the window and seeing all of it. All right. So up next in the Healthy Building webinar series, we will be focusing on LEED in January. So mark your calendars for that. If you have missed any of the previous webinars and would like to check them out, you can do so at our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and search USGBC WM, our profile will come up and you can go to our playlists and you can see the Healthy Building webinar series as well as our other content. There's also a link at the bottom of the slide, and these slides will be shared out along with the webinar recording in the next couple of days. And if you are not a member but are interested in becoming one, you can scan the QR code on the screen to join today. You can check out our website or reach out to any one of our staff. We'd be very happy to talk with you and walk you through what that process looks like to become a member. And to our members that are on the call today, thank you as always for your support. We can't do this work without you, and you're the reason we can put out educational material like this webinar today. And also a big thank you to our visionary supporters, DTE, Consumers Energy, Eagle, and the Weggy Foundation. So here is our agenda. Kat will go first to give us some background on Phius, and then Doug is going to give us some case study examples. So, and then we'll have our Q&A at the end. I will stop sharing and let Kat take over.
All right. Thank you, Kayla, for a very nice introduction. Very happy to be here with you guys today. Michigan, I think, is really starting to kick into gear in terms of zero carbon efforts, and I'm really super excited about that. So hopefully we can help you in your practice with your zero carbon goals as you move forward. So how does passive building support the zero carbon goals? And I'm not sure why I'm not advancing. I think I just need to click on here for a second. Here we go. So who are we at Phius? Our vision and mission has been really centered around the whole zero carbon goal. Originally, we started out with like a very, very close focus on the operational energy in buildings. But like ever since zero energy buildings really have become cost effective and feasible, we have essentially shifted almost entirely to zero carbon. That is really now our, well, zero carbon. Initially, zero certification. We're still working on the carbon piece. Obviously, you're all aware that that is a complicated thing to integrate, but that is soon to come. So that definitely is our focus. And if you go to our website, you'll find that the mission is like very straightforward. We are envisioning a world where every building supports the health of people and planet. And again, that goes back to our core motivation of doing something about climate change. So what do we do and how do we do this? We certify and train consultants in the principles that lead to most optimized kind of like baseline energy design for zero carbon buildings. We do certify products. We use a pretty detailed energy modeling tool that is not super complicated, that actually makes it easy for the architect to do the energy design and optimization him or herself. So that's the little computer there on the left. We do certify buildings and quality assure buildings, because as you design these buildings to these very tight margins of energy performance, there's a great need for quality assurance. And it's also essentially like our super experienced team is like an additional team member on your team as you're trying to get your building certified. And all of our standards that we have been setting over the last 10 years, they have been developed in cooperation with the Department of Energy. And some of you are certainly aware that a passive building or passive house did not originate very recently. It really came out of the first oil embargo. And the principles were heavily, well, not the principles, but the research that then codified the principles was heavily subsidized by the governments at the time, the U.S. government as well as the Canadian government. So this is not new stuff. We're just getting better at it. And then we also have an alliance network that is essentially our advocacy group. We have, I think, 16 chapters around the country, and they help us with talking to code officials and trying to make the case that really these standards should be the baseline for zero energy buildings and should be included in zero energy stretch codes. And we have made a lot of progress on that front. All right, so really, in a nutshell, the zero operational carbon is the goal on our current 2 building certifications. And we don't have to get technical here. If you really want to jump in on this, like they are the next follow-up trainings that we have available, like maybe just like an initial 101 for the passive building principles. But just in general, like the whole idea here is we have a historic baseline of buildings and they are not very efficient. We determine where we need to go with the shell. That's why we call it Phius Core. So that incorporates all the passive building principles and techniques that gets you to this baseline. And that baseline is also cost optimized. So we want to avoid that we invest too much in the envelope for not very much return any longer. At some point, there's a diminishing return on like the passive principles. And at that point, we encourage folks to hop over to going to all the way to Phius by adding a renewable energy to the project. And again, like this little house thing here on the bottom, this is really just like an icon because our standards apply equally to all building typologies, to single family, multifamily, commercial, as well as retrofit applications. So then under the Phius Zero certification program, at that point, we encourage you as the design team, obviously not just to go to zero, but the goal is to zero out the carbon. But to do that, you probably will have a safe kind of like cushion in terms of sizing your renewable energy, and you essentially become positive energy, and you start drawing down carbon on that end as well. So this is what this little like green stripy indicates you're actually overproducing. And the passive building principles are pretty straightforward. This is not rocket science. This is thermal control for the envelope, insulation and thermal bridging need to be dealt with, air control so that we don't have any condensation in the wall assemblies. Cold climates like the one in Michigan, that's a real concern. Once you up your insulation levels, we want to build the building shell itself airtight, but then of course we need high quality ventilation with filtration. And also with energy recovery, and we have then radiation. Shading is very important, daylighting is important, and the performance of the window package is important, and that depends all on the climate that you're in. And here's really just like a very basic, like kind of drawing of what that envelope upgrade does for you. It essentially flattens the energy load over the course of a year. So passive building is also kind of like a synonym for a very low load building. And once you have these super low loads in the summer and in the winter, then you can actually significantly reduce your mechanical system. And again, that applies to all building typologies, same principle here. So some of the additional upfront costs, especially in big buildings, is then significantly offset by the reduction of the mechanical system. And once we put all this in place, then we get like a building that delivers all these wonderful benefits like comfort and healthy interiors, safety, resilience, durability, and long-term affordability. So really kind of like pretty magic and not that hard to do. So let's hop into our certification process. As I mentioned, we started working with the US Department quite a while back in developing our standards to cost optimize them, to incorporate very stringent QA/QC quality assurance during the construction process. And these are really all the energy programs in the US that do that in the way that DOE says it should be done. I.e. including very stringent quality assurance on site as well, not just design certification. So what's the difference between Zero Energy Ready Home and Phius Core and Phius Zero? Why is there differentiation? The Department of Energy decided Zero Energy Ready homes are homes that in their mind are cost effective. So they hold off on the upgrades on the envelope quite a bit earlier than we do, because they say like there will be decarbonization in the grid, and that will be just fine and good enough. But in our opinion, this is actually not going to be enough, because we're already behind the curve on like climate action, and really buildings want to go to zero because as climate change is already in effect, more and more attention is shifting to adaptation and resilience as well. So to make your building really truly resilient, we actually envision like cities to be built around this concept and then combined with microgrids to further make the overall grid resilient as well. And how does this differ from other green building programs? I saw you had like a whole bunch of different green building programs here on your educational calendar. So essentially, there's a bit confusion out there in terms of what the difference is between the various programs. So I like to describe like ILFI and LEED and Green Globes and BREEAM as like overall green building programs, and they refer to these like external energy optimization engines, and Phius is one of those external energy optimization engines. So, and it's important to understand that these energy engines, they have like easy to apply kind of like instructions for you to get to this optimized level. And ILFI, for example, or LEED, they don't have that built in. You really should be doing this optimization process, because otherwise you're kind of like reinventing the wheel. So going through the certification process with us is really going to help you to streamline and to make sure that you're hitting all the important points and that you actually meet the performance that you're shooting for. So a certification process, again, as I mentioned, quality, health, safety, durability is like absolutely #1 importance. And then on top of that, we lay out the passive conservation strategies to get to our resilience goals. And that means we can float through power outages. That's how good the envelope becomes, right? Like, so snowfall in Michigan, maybe the power goes out, you can stay in your home. And then after you put the passive conservation strategies in place, the next step is to optimize your active system. So you want to find electrification technology that is super efficient, like heat pumps with a very high COP, and that will get you then to the level of that we want to expect for the Phius core certification level. And then once you go above and beyond from there, that takes you to the Phius Zero certification. So at that point, you're adding the appropriate amount of on-site renewable energy, but that's not always possible. So off-site renewable energy is also allowed under our certification process. All right, so Phius standards are different from other passive house and building standards. We have a climate-specific standard. So that means that for any kind of like location, you have a custom target. You can see this right here in these like screenshots. On the left, this is a let me see, like this is a pretty large building in New York for non-residential, and you can see the annual heating demand, cooling demand, the peak heat load, and the peak cooling load numbers, like kind of second box from the bottom. Those are really the design targets that we ask you to pick your envelope to meet. And those targets change depending on how big your building is, because different building sizes and types have internal loads, and they're all figured into the performance. So in this like next one over here, the residential retrofit one, you can see that with like a different size of building, these targets pretty significantly change. So this is very detailed and very optimized. And again, we're aiming to get you to the most cost-effective and most comfortable solution with this process. Under 2021, we update our standards every 3 years because we basically have committed to like climate is changing and costs are changing, and we want to hit the sweet spot. So that means we have to revisit our assumptions every 3 years, and we have done this ever since 2015. We're now on 2021. And you can see here that we're now moving very, very clearly in the direction of zero energy and wholly electrified buildings. So for our Phius Zero certification, and we also recently came out with a Phius core perspective where you don't have to do like detailed energy modeling anymore. That makes it more cost effective and easier for people to do. It's basically just a checklist. For those certifications, we're no longer allowing fossil fuel combustion. If you just go to essentially zero energy ready, the Phius core level, at that point, we're still allowing for a combustion, but we ask you to consider like that probably in the next 10 years, you will want to electrify because people will potentially decommission gas. So we ask for a plan so that electrification can be achieved easily later. I'm going to check my time here real quick. I've got to speed up a little bit. Quite a bit of uptake over the last couple of years. We are now at 16 million square feet total submitted. And yes, so we're talking about like beyond homes. Definitely, we've gone beyond homes. Most of these square feet come now from multifamily submissions, so pretty large, and they're distributed across the entire United States. Submitted means like there are a whole bunch in the works right now, not fully certified yet. Fully certified, we have about 7 million square feet and 13 K certified dwelling units, and you can see right here in the right hand kind of map where most of the activity is happening. And in the next slide, it's even more detailed, kind of like who is leading the pack here. Definitely the Northeast is ahead of everybody else, Massachusetts and New York right now. and some activity on the West Coast as well, but it doesn't compare to what is happening on the East Coast. Our measured results versus model performance are excellent. We're within like ±7%, and we attribute that to very stringent quality assurance that I mentioned earlier during the construction process. And just a quick note on cost. So Massachusetts conducted an independent competition. They enrolled, I believe, 10 multifamily projects. And in exchange for some pretty nice like grant money, people had to provide cost data. And all these projects, except a few like probably like early projects, because experience matters, they're now coming in like right around on average between 1% to 2%. And for a large multifamily building, that's at that point, the developer really cannot afford not to do it. And a lot of this is driven by affordable multifamily housing right now, because there's like very hefty qualified allocation plan incentivification has been written into 17 states across the country. And so this is our largest to date fully certified project, an affordable 26-story project in the Bronx. We had just had the big ribbon cutting. The governor was there, so pretty big deal. A very nice project, and there are many more to come in the near future. Another one in the Bronx. In New York, they're really going for it. And just like here real quick, like what we kind of like saw in the single family homes initially in terms of detailing, air barrier, continuous insulation, and thermal bridge free kind of like detailing, that translates really well to multifamily projects. It's not adding too much more cost. And then also for commercial buildings, so this is the detailing here, like typical reference building wall for an office building in Chicago that was designed by Solomon Caldwell Benz, and they improved the details on the right to meet Phius standards, and they did. And this is the project, Fulton Market. It's probably finished by now. Unfortunately, the developer sold it before it was done, and the new developer was not interested in paying for the certification, but they kept the details and the specs. So once you do all these things, again, driving the point home what the benefits are, it's not just like the original, like high level, like 6 performance benefits, but it's also passive building provides a whole bunch of benefits for the owners and developers in terms of increased energy independence, decreased maintenance calls, and long-term investment. And for the tenants, you are guaranteed comfort, healthy indoor quality, livable, resilient spaces during outages. And of course, you get to benefit from super low energy bills. So this concludes my presentation. I'm going to shoot it over to Doug, and he has a couple of really cool case studies for you here in Chicago. Next step, if you're really curious to see how all this stuff works, we always have 101 trainings, and you can find those on our website. Doug, please share your screen, and I stop sharing. Hold on.
Thank you, Kat. Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Let me get my screen up here. That looks like it. All right. So thanks for including me. Can you all see that?
Ooh, nice.
Lots of color, lots of images. So I get to talk about the practice of the theory that Kat just laid out for you. So I'm Doug Farr, president of Farr Associates. We're based in Chicago, though I'm a child of Detroit, Cass Tech grad, University of Michigan grad. So sort of I feel like homecoming today. So, but we've been at it for 30 years, and we do high performance buildings. This is a timeline of our work, high performance buildings above the line and places we've planned below the line. And I have completely drunk the Kool-Aid on Passive House and Phius, and agree with Katrin that Phius is the future, but we need to do it today. Our practice over 25, 30 years has really been on the cutting edge of high performance buildings. Here's 4 of them that have, special claims to fame. And one of which is the upper right one, the Academy for Global Citizenship. I'll talk about it in a minute, is the first project, I think, that's pursuing both the Living Building Challenge and Phius certification. So it's a really neat crossover project. But anyway, we've been at this a long time. As Kat said, experience matters. And boy, I have gray hair from all this good stuff, but it's the work we want to do. So here are 3 examples of projects we completed, which are all Phius certified. And 2 of the 3 are fully certified. The one on the right, Broadway Loft, was just completed and occupied. So we have a kind of workout period for a year or so. But anyway, we've been through it a couple of times, and there is a steep learning curve that gets flatter and flatter and flatter, and you sort of work it out. So, but all of the prior experience doing LEED certified buildings and net zero buildings and so on was good preparation for Phius. So I'm going to talk about 2 projects today, one of which is called Galleria 89. And my partner in crime, the developer, my client for this project is the man pictured here, AJ Patton, who's quite a dynamic leader and developer, really committed to equitable development and inclusion, and including his development team, accepting me, is pretty much an all-Black team. And so he sought us out for our expertise in green buildings and said, I want you to work with, my chosen consultants, and they're all going to be newbies. And, we're going to really rely heavily, Doug, on your experience, because none of my team have green building experience. And that's the point. And so we really have been, it's been a learning curve on how to sort of bring other professionals around you along with you. So, but we will get there, and there are many stories maybe we can cover in the Q&A. So part of why AJ invited us to come in was he was working with another developer who had, City of Chicago has a program called Invest Southwest, which is trying to make investments in otherwise underinvested communities on the west and south side. So this project, Galleria 89, it falls squarely in that program. So there was a developer design competition that was held, and this was the winning image here with the new construction building you see there on the left. So 3.5, 4-story building, fairly glassy masonry and so on. So that's what won the competition. Our collaborating architect, Ravetna Architects, wasn't happy with it, and before we got involved, went from this to this. And it's sort of jarring when you put on a hat that's about all the things Katrin was talking about, kind of thermal efficiency and minimizing thermal bridging in an envelope, and getting the windows right and so on. Like, oh my gosh! So the kind of flying buttresses, the kind of blue speckled brick, the lack of things that stack. So it's just really kind of crazy. So hence, maybe why AJ asked us to come in. So we turned that into that. And so there's a companion building to the right here, an existing historic building that will be retained and restored. And so what we composed here was a kind of top-bottom composition of the gold brick, the lower 3 levels of the building on the right. We reflected in the upper 2 levels of our building on the left. So kind of a top bottom strategy. So, and then a courtyard in between. So we rationalized the kind of just stacked sugar cubes of the last image into something that stacks, and contemplated, really rethought how you would enclose this building in a Phius-like envelope while retaining the intentional masonry grid of the lower floors and the stepped balconies and so on. So quite challenging. Here's just another view from the street, and you can see we've worked very hard to stack the balconies, which makes a lot more sense than having them kind of random and so on. So I think we've got it worked out, and I'll lead you through some details. So just for orientation, here's the new construction building. Here's the ground floor plan. It faces 2 streets. This is 89th and Commercial. A large commercial tenant was is proposed there, with 2 residential units on the lower ground floor, and then upper floors are kind of a U-shaped plan you can see here, with a classic kind of U-shaped corridor. The one thing that we bring forward to AJ, our kind of common bond, was a desire to reduce utility bills for low-income families, and something that he hadn't really sort of thought through or had thought about, but we were able to kind of give specifics to was this idea of improving health outcomes for lower income families living in his projects, and specifically what we're able to do by getting out of the business of cooking with gas, propane and methane burned in a living space, and most of it doesn't actually get drawn out even in a very effective vent hood. So all of that exhaust gas really goes into our lungs and our children's lungs. And so making the case for an all electric building, including the elimination of domestic cooking gas, was a kind of easy sell. So, and there's stats from US EPA: indoor air is 2 to 6 times more polluted than outdoor air. I think our indoor air will be very high quality. In fact, I know it will be very high quality because of the stringent requirements of Passive House that require continuous outdoor mechanical ventilation. So we do expect to lower our energy use by more than 50%, but the utility bill is somewhere around a third or 40%, because they still have to pay monthly bills for just to get a utility bill. So there are parts, several parts of Phius that we have to do. Optimizing the windows, that is minimizing the percentage of facade glass, or optimizing it, say it as you will, is a big focus. Thermally, we had balconies, we inherited them in the design that was the competition winner. So we have to work out how to make those thermally broken, and then striving for a really high performance wall system. And at the time we had proposed this, it was our understanding that this type of system, often called the Cascadia Cliff system, had not been built in Chicago. And so we were struggling to get decent pricing for it. In the 4 months from last November to November 2021 to March of 2022, we heard back from our general contractor that there were then 3 bidders, 3 projects that were sort of circulating on the street that were bidding the same system. So Passive House had hit Chicago and hit it hard, and it was kind of out in the marketplace. And so, here's a kind of tool if you're interested in WUFI. As Katrin said, the staff is excellent, and they will offer for a small fee kind of a feasibility study sort of right up front. And sort of, here's a snapshot of where you are, here's a snapshot of what you'll likely have to do. This was guidance on whether we were thermally breaking the balconies or not, and kind of how the performance would have to be across the whole building. And what we found is if we thermally broke the balconies, roughly speaking, we could simplify systems and thin walls and save lots of money across 4 or 5 buckets of specifications. So as I mentioned, we inherited a design that had a kind of lower masonry grid. And so we worked out a set of details. It's a concrete frame building, steel stud floor to floor, the Cascadia clips and continuous mineral wool insulation, excuse me, and then a freestanding masonry wall outboard of that here, tied back occasionally. So we've really minimized the thermal bridging because the insulation, this blue, is continuous from the top of the foundation right up to the parapet. So interrupted only for windows. So it's a really exemplary assembly. Here's what those kind of wall assemblies look like when they're under construction. Cascadia clips, here they come in differing depths and colors and so on. So if you're not familiar with it, it's a neat thing to see. I can show you more about it. In terms of cost premiums, here's kind of a snapshot of where we have been. New construction in Chicago for mixed use, multi-story, multifamily is costing a lot, $360 to $380 a square foot. So it's really ballooned coming out of COVID and the supply chain stuff. But amidst that, there's one number I can point you to, which is to achieve all of the high quality performance characteristics of a Phius mechanical system is costing us at this project about $4 per square foot, which is a little over 1%. This is just the mechanical system. I know we have another associated premium for the wall system that I've shown you. We're guessing maybe that the construction premium all told is 4 or 5% above what a code building would be. So, but it's not 10, it's not 20. And if you look at the return on investment over the period of years, it's good. And then if you think about a different economic principle called opportunity costs, we're all trained to think about return on investment and diminishing returns. So you say, stop spending money on insulation. You've already got 4 inches. You don't need 6 inches. Stop spending money because there's diminishing returns. That's one principle of economics. Another one that I think is more valid when it comes to climate concerns in buildings, it's called opportunity cost. When are you actually going to come back and go, if you got it wrong and you only built 4 inches of insulation, you need 6. What's the cost of coming back and doing it again? So it's infinite. You really can't do it. So I think there's a kind of a weighing of those considerations in the work we do. This is one sample to say that I took on my staff a kind of non-Phius architect who's a good architect and said, design this building and give me a first facade. And so his first effort was on the left-hand side, 44% glass. And I said, try again, see what you can do to simplify and reduce glass. So this is actually his second try. First try, we got to 37, second try, 33. And in the end, we're a little under 30. We're in the upper 20s for facade glass. And so the design of the facade really, saves us money. Every square foot of glass that we can replace with wall, we think is a cost savings. The contractors informed us of that. So it improves energy performance, it improves the cost. And so I think it pushes our design stresses our design muscles to come up with, work harder at kind of facade composition, because it's very easy to kind of a gridded facade and mostly glass and so on. We can do that in our sleep. Making a building beautiful with less glazing, I think it requires more effort and more talent. So that's kind of where we are. So the second project I wanted to talk about is the one I referred to, the Academy for Global Citizenship. This is a kind of willy-nilly site plan, but basically it's on the southwest side of Chicago. If you know Chicago, it's sort of halfway between the Loop and Midway Airport. And it's a 6-acre site. It will be Chicago's first full Living Building Challenge certified project. It will also be Phius certified. So it's a very exciting crossover. Here's the floor plan. It is a pinwheel plan. If you can recognize that, kind of like when you were a kid and you had one of those pinwheels that would spin in the wind. So kind of these are each sort of classroom clusters, and then a kind of heart space, and then the upper floor, just a 2-story building. Here's what it looks like from the air and its campus. Here's that pinwheel plan, the PV array across the roof. We have skylights that sit on top of the PV, so we never don't have PVs, even though we're having skylights. Here's hoop houses and so on for growing food for 630 kids, and the goal is to grow as much food as possible to feed all the kids in this K-8 school 2 square meals a day. It has if you've heard of the term EUI, energy use intensity, it has a modeled EUI, projected EUI of 20. For just building operations, and then 26 when you add in the food service, all the kind of energy that goes to cooking and washing dishes and so on. So 20 or 26, which places the building solidly in solar ready territory and also solidly in Phius territory. So, and I'll just show you this one thing, keep my comments short so we can have some time for discussion. When you think about how a building goes together, it's like, what fundamentally changed? So on the Galleria project, I showed you how we want a wall that has continuous insulation with minimal thermal bridging. So we've accomplished that. When you have exterior balconies, and it's a good thing to have balconies. Balconies are fun. People delight in being able to step out on an upper story and be outdoors up in the air. Excuse me. But it leads you to new details. So I draw your attention to this detail here, which is the Academy for Global Citizenship under construction. So this is the thermally broken steel connection. So they're fairly expensive. You don't want to do it all the time, but they're effective, and you can work them into your details. And aside from supply chain issues, which were definitely a challenge last year and earlier this year, getting less and less so. But there it is. And so the crews are all kind of everyone wants to see it, touch it. Is it really strong enough? What is that made of? All these kinds of things. And so it's just expect this level of kind of structural break in your wall and structural assemblies where the structure penetrates through the exterior envelope. So I'm going to put in a last minute plug for, it's not a project, but it's an invitation. So there's an exhibit right now in Chicago. And I know when I growing up in Detroit, I always loved visiting Chicago. So you're hereby invited, and I have a date and time for you. to see this exhibit called The Energy Revolution. And it's up now at the Chicago Architecture Center, which is at 111 East Wacker. You'd know it. It's just off of Michigan Avenue on the south side of Chicago River. So it's the place that runs the tour boats and the walking tours and things like that. So you're invited, and we can follow up through GBC Michigan to a curator's talk on Saturday, January 7th at 1 p.m. So if you want to come, this would be, the weekend after New Year's kind of thing. Come into town, we can follow up. But this is me, I'm the curator, so I'll be there. And what you will learn is something like this. So one of the most interesting bits of research we've come across, in fact, we performed this research, is Chicago has an energy benchmarking database, which tracks the energy use of about 3,000 buildings dating back to the 1880s. Excuse me. And we looked at the energy use of all those buildings and knocked out the kind of weird buildings, airports and labs and hospitals, and we're left with still more than 2,000 buildings in the database. And what we found was the most energy efficient buildings in Chicago in the year 2019 were built in the 1880s. And the least energy efficient buildings in Chicago in the year 2019 were built in the 1950s. And the third bombshell was that the newest buildings being built in the 20-aughts were yet to be as efficient as buildings 130 years older. So Houston, we have a problem. So what we did was kind of identified sort of iconic buildings from those earlier two periods of architecture, kind of the skyscraper school and the glass box school. And we built full-scale mock-ups of those walls. And so if you come to the exhibit, what we'll do is have a talk about kind of why the energy use changed so much over the generations. And then the wall on the third wall on the right, the white one, is a mock-up of the Academy for Global Citizenship. And so you can see John Root and Daniel Burnham on the left, Mies van der Rohe in the middle, and Farr Associates and Phius on the right. So it's really instructive. And I'll just say everybody that sees it agrees it's a very tactile exhibit that you sort of, you get the lesson. So I think I'm done there, and I will stop sharing and look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Wow, I wrote a lot of notes during that one, and I appreciate you going through the detail of those buildings as well, really showing those renderings and the process that you had to go through to change things up in phases, and looking at all of the thermal information and the energy information. So I know I really appreciate that more specific information. We had one question in the chat. What level of certification is the Academy for Global Citizenship project pursuing for both LBC and Phius?
Sure. For LBC, we're pursuing full LBC certification. And for those of you who are familiar with the standard, there used to be LBC pedal certification, where you could pick one of three: energy or water or materials. It required you to do a number of things across the board, but you really focused on that. We had done that previously. We've done material certification at the University of Chicago Keller School, and that opened in 2019. So we knew how to maneuver that pedal, and it really relates very closely to what's called the EPA Red List of 704 chemicals that shouldn't be used, really. They're kind of carcinogens and mutacrines and endocrine disruptors. So the policing out of those bad chemicals is one of the three legs of LBC. Second one is net zero energy. And with all of our work on Phius, and Phius, as Kat referred to it correctly, which is Phius is kind of the delivery vehicle, the engine, if you will, for getting to net zero. LBC is not a certifying body like Phius or ASHRAE or anything like that. So it relies on outside things. So I think Phius is the perfect pathway to achieve net zero, and it does it beautifully rather than ugly. So I should sort of say that there's a way to design a building, however, and then you slap enough solar panels on it to declare it net zero. And that's winning ugly. Winning beautifully is designing a passive building that has you've sort of designed out most of the energy losses and inefficiencies. And so when you go to invest, if you choose to add PVs, it's a modest investment compared to the energy inefficient building. So anyway, we knew how to do net zero thanks to all of our work over the years. And then the hardest one is really the water pedal. And that's hard in a place where this isn't a meeting about that, but the water pedal is the hardest. So full LBC is the answer, and then Phius, full Phius. So there you go.
Yeah, I like that part about the I think that, so I went through the LFA training, and when going through that, I thought to myself, oh, the zero part would be really hard, as well as the water, but the zero part would be really hard. And I think that that's a really interesting perspective to talk about how they work together rather than wanting to only do one and one alone and ignore them.
I like to emphasize that again, like they are really synergistic in that way. And we also don't have like a post certification, like verification of the actual zero, and they do. So while they don't have the how to get there and the optimization engine, but then they have the verification once you come out on the other end. So it's really beautifully aligned. And once you add all the like materials to it and the carbon assessments of embodied energy, so you don't want to over insulate, because once you start looking at the embodied carbon, so you really want like an energy efficient optimizing engine that gets you to the ideal limit of insulation. You don't want to have to have too much.
Yeah, that touched on something I wrote down too, is if you have looked in depth into embodied carbon versus like thermal control and like what that looks like. Because I think, concrete, they say, is really intensive. So kind of that like breaking point with both of them. But.
Yeah, and it's totally like, it depends on which building typology, new construction or retrofit. So if you go to new construction, you really should go to like Phius levels for sure. For some climate zones, new construction Phius is the exact right optimal point. But for retrofit, it might be a different one, like a little less, right? So 2030 promotes that, well, embodied carbon is 50-50 and operational, but they don't go as far as we do in terms of like saving operational energy. Yeah, so it depends. It totally depends. We've done the math.
And then one other one, just kind of quickly, you mentioned the energy modeling tool. To get certification, do you have to use your energy modeling tool, or will any count? Because I know there's other ones out there, so I was just wondering if it's that one specifically, or if there's other ones that can be used.
No, it is that one specifically, and it is the energy modeling protocol that is also important, because like if you other tools have different protocols, you really have to have a specific protocol and the capability of the tool to get like continuously the same results. So that's why we only accept the WFI tool right at the moment, but it's easy to use, and consultants get trained in using it.
Okay, great. Well, Doug, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say several things. I'm reading the chat, so I can see some old friends are popping up. So, hey, how's it going, everybody? Please come to Chicago on January 7th. I'll follow up through everybody, and we'll send out an Eventbrite so you don't show up and miss the time or something like that, or the time change was crazy. So, number one. Number two, I'll say just to my friends on the call, we've done LEED certifications for more than 20 years. Our first project, which I showed a picture of but didn't talk about, was the Chicago Center for Green Technology, which we started designing, cover your ears, in the 20th century. It was 1999. And so it was started in 1999, finished construction in 2002. So we've been doing, LEED for 20 years. And so in the year 2019, I officially thanked LEED for its service and moved on. And not that LEED isn't still useful, and a lot of clients want it still, particularly institutions of higher learning. Some of the environmental responsible investments are all keyed into LEED. But I think the world needs Phius more than it needs LEED, and I'll tell you why. I think you can do LEED's great advantage is its flexibility. So if you don't want to do energy that much, you don't want to do water that much, you can kind of work around it. Even in a platinum building, because we've done 12 LEED platinum buildings over the years, there's always some weak point. There's always something like if we didn't get to it, or we didn't have the money for that, or we didn't know what we were doing. And you can still pull out a LEED certification. I know it because I've done a lot of times with gaps. And Phius is frankly unforgiving on the things about which opportunity costs matter most, which is the one thing you can do in a building is get the envelope right. Hello, you just don't come, unless you're tearing the building down immediately, you don't touch the envelope twice. So it's the one thing that I think Phius really focuses on, and you can do LEED all day and still not get the envelope right. And so, and it's not just kind of reducing, it's building science. I think those of us who went to architecture school, even some good architecture schools, didn't learn building science. And so the basics of how do you prevent mold in a building? How do you allow it to dry out without just frankly heating the damn thing with fossil fuels? And so that's what building science is. And so it's just practical things. The code is getting closer and closer to, kind of compelling you to think about building science. So anyway, it's a very sensible thing. And I just think, I will just say all of the years of heavy burden of paperwork to comply with LEED, and I do still love LEED, but I feel like it's accomplished its mission. So that's really good. It's changed the conversation completely. In fact, Phius arguably wouldn't have succeeded as well as it did if the world weren't primed to do building certifications. It happens to be a different one that's got a more targeted focus. But anyway, I love Phius. We are as an office committed to all electric buildings. And that was something we couldn't have done as recently as 2 or 3 years ago. I don't think the technology was there. We occasionally still lose battles with clients. We sign a contract that says we're doing an all electric building. We get halfway through and there's something like an oops moments like, oh my God, no. But we don't fire the client once we're halfway through a building. So we fire them right up front, but once they're halfway through and we just can't make it work, we'll finish it. But the goal is, at some point there will be the last fossil fuel building. And I sure don't want anybody on this call to be the person that designed it. That would be embarrassing. So cut it out, people. Let's get on with this new program. And please consider coming to visit Chicago on January 7th. And there's dates before then. If you happen to be here during the week, that just is kind of the one weekend date we had sort of spoken for. So if there's interest to come sooner, we could probably swing, a Saturday date somewhere sooner. So anyway, I'll shut up.
No, that was really great. Thank you for all those comments. And I will say too, I think most of the people on the call know this, and you can clearly see that with the Healthy Building webinar series we're in now. We've been talking about the different certifications as a U.S. Green Building Council. Just for some context around there, we are aligned with the National USGBC, but we promote more than LEED. Clearly, we're here talking about Phius. Obviously, we're going to be talking about LEED in January, hopefully talking about the newest version of it and what's going on in the state of Michigan, right? But we love also hearing about the different perspectives and what the different certifications can do, and also love hearing about how they work together. That I think is a huge piece. So I just saw something else in the chat. Let me see. Okay, everyone's loving your comments. So
there you go. I was going to say since we're talking to USGBC Western Michigan, I always reach for my Bible, right? So, but the Bible, refers to the Tower of Babel, where, prior to it, the languages where everyone could communicate, and the Tower of Babel was like, no, you're going to learn all these different languages and you'll be confused and won't be able to communicate. And I feel like that's where the the Green Building Certification world was. Kat's slide made it seem kind of reasonable, but it's crazy. We should, and I want to compliment Kat. Kat was just at Green Build, right? And was on a panel. She's too modest to say this, so I'll say it for her, with no less a luminary than Peter Templeton and Lindsay Baker, who run respectively USGBC and the International Living Futures Institute. And so there's Kat, the three of them up there saying, let's get together and not waste people's time with different formats or different requirements and so on. Like, let's nest, let's coalesce. And so I'm really excited about that, and the ability that fewer and fewer forms of paperwork and certification are required. It just sort of streamlines. And then my last comment on this first is my Kat and I worked together on a chapter in my book called Sustainable Nation, and it had 70 patterns for the future, and one of them is approach every project as though Phius, the energy code of the future, we're in effect today. That's really what we're trying to do, which is Phius is around the corner. It's coming, people. And so you can get on, you can be the person learning it for the first time in 2035, or you could have done 6 of them by 2022. So I chose the latter path, but I really am enthusiastic about it and excited for people to learn about it. So, come to Chicago.
Awesome. Kat, did you have anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
Not really. Thank you for the shout out, Doug. It's hard to follow. Like you're a really great advocate for all this, and I want to thank Doug and his willingness to really be in the trenches and pave the path for everybody else who will follow. It'll be a lot easier thanks to you, Doug, for those.
Oh, it's a mutual admiration society. Wonderful. So well, thanks to everybody at GBC Western Michigan, and come what may, come to Chicago to see the exhibit sooner or later. That would be lovely. It does close on January 10th, so there's a hard stop. Catch it before it goes, because it's a really cool thing to see it and experience it. So, but I hope to see everybody when we start reconvening. So that's it.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. Responding to something in the chat real quick. Yeah, and I want to say, thank you so much to both of you. Really great insight, and I think we had a pretty good conversation there too. So I'm looking forward to that event in Chicago. I'm hoping I can make it down there for that. That sounds really exciting, and to meet you in person, because we do most of this stuff virtually now. And for the audience, also I want to say, if you have any ideas for future webinars, please let us know. Email me, email our admin account. We'd love to hear from you. And like I said, our next one will be in January. So keep an eye out for that information on that. And this recording will be sent out, and will be on our YouTube channel, and we will send out the slides as well in a follow-up webinar. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day, and stay warm here in Michigan and the Midwest. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.